What does a relationship look like between a type 2 helper and a type 4 individualist? Well, let's start off by talking about a few things they have in common. All right, folks, I hope you're ready for the feels with this one, because a 2-4 relationship is a lot like a great compilation album, or for my fellow millennials out there, a mix CD, where one track is a soulful ballad that makes you tear up thinking of someone you've lost, and the next is a 90s banger that's cheesy as hell, but you can't help but sing along. It's a real journey that spans many different genres, and yet somehow there's a core theme tying it all together. Well, for the 2-4 couples out there, that theme is usually tied to their place within the heart triad center, as they both navigate life primarily through their emotions. Although 4s are usually more influenced by their painful emotions, while 2s are more influenced by their positive emotions. But we'll talk more about that as we go along. And for now, it's just important to know that all heart types are very concerned with their identity and how other people perceive them, which is even more true if this couple shares a 3-wing, as that symbolizes an even deeper connection to their heart center. Now, if this couple does in fact share a strong 3-wing, then it usually means they're equally concerned about their social status. This in turn leads to a couple that's usually great at work in a room, as they bring a mixture of positive energy, emotional intuition, and a fair amount of storytelling that usually keeps their audiences as engaged as possible. But with that said, this couple doesn't always have a strong connection at the 3, as 4s can have a dominant 5-wing, and 2s can have a dominant 1-wing. However, that brings us to another interesting point of connection for this couple, as the 4's movement of integration is to the type 1 reformer. This means that healthy or secure 4s embody a sense of disciplined conviction. That's very similar to the way a 2-wing 1 feels compelled to serve others based on their strong moral compass. So, essentially, 2s and 4s are just as likely to bond over their desire to impress people with their gifts as they are to bond over using their gifts for the good of others. All right, the last major point of connection between 2s and 4s is actually with each other via the 2's movement of integration and the 4's movement of disintegration. This means that 2s and 4s can embody the high and low side of each other's personalities under very different conditions and at very different levels of health. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to summarize this theory in a way that may seem overly simplistic. So if you want to learn more, just be sure to check out my complete guides to Enneagram 2s and 4s that I've got linked for you in the description below. So, the 2's movement of integration is to the 4, which symbolizes the way that a mature 2 learns to embrace their darker emotions, like envy, anger, or sorrow. As they do this, they become truly warm and accepting of not only themselves, but of all people, much like a healthy type 4 individualist. On the flip side, the 4's movement of disintegration is to the 2, which symbolizes the way insecure 4s can become overly clingy or dependent on other people. Typically, this happens after they've destabilized their life with some rather self-indulgent behavior, much like an unhealthy 2. So, at the end of the day, this couple's highly emotional perspectives, when mixed with their connections at type 1, 2, 3, and 4, can either create a beautiful playlist of complementary styles, or a jarring mashup of conflicting genres, like a bad wedding DJ playing an EDM version of My Heart Will Go On. It's like, what are we doing with this? We slow dancing? We taking ecstasy? Like, what is this? Okay, speaking of skipping ahead to the songs you like, let's talk about a few things that 2s find uniquely attractive about 4s and vice versa. Perhaps the greatest source of attraction for 2s in a relationship with a 4 is the way that 4s have this open-hearted embrace of painful emotions, which then makes them capable of forming incredibly deep bonds with other people. Now, the reason this is so attractive is because 2s are the most relationally oriented of all Enneagram types, and so they're always hungry for meaningful connections. However, 2s often unintentionally subvert the loving intimacy they crave by maintaining this facade of bright cheerfulness that they think is the best way to win people over, but in fact is the quickest way to create shallow, if not downright codependent relationships. This is also why the 2's movement of integration is to the 4, as an essential part of their personal growth is something 4s do naturally, which is this open-hearted embrace of painful emotions. Healthy 4s not only model how to empathize with people in their darkest hour, but also how to turn that darkness into something truly beautiful. And not beautiful in the sunshine and rainbows kind of way, but in the mournful celebration of a life that's no longer with us kind of way. This ability to hold the full spectrum of light and dark emotions is the only thing that makes the 2's positivity a genuine blessing in the lives of others, rather than this form of toxic positivity that attempts to ignore anything too negative, especially in their own hearts. Speaking of which, when twos can no longer suppress the gunk that's building up inside of them, they experience their movement of disintegration to the low side of the type 8 challenger. This, again, is how the 4 becomes such an attractive friend or partner to the 2, as they can not only hold a non-judgmental space for the 2 to express whatever unfiltered thoughts and feelings they need to get off their chest, but they can also empathize with the experience of feeling overwhelmed by emotion and wanting to just do whatever self-indulgent thing comes to mind. Luckily, healthy 4s are often intuitive enough to notice when the 2 might be close to hitting their breaking point, and then helping them proactively process that inner tension before it spills out in a way they'll later regret. All of which helps the 2 feel incredibly seen, supported, and safe exploring rather than ignoring the depths of their heart. All right, on that lovely note, it's time to shift gears and talk about a few things the 4 finds uniquely attractive about the 2. Fours are often attracted to 2s because they're a mixture of nurturing, encouraging, and generous. Now, the 2's nurturing energy is attractive because it allows them to treat the 4's emotions with care. This is super important because 4s identify deeply with their emotions. And so one of the quickest ways to lose intimacy with them is to either dismiss or downplay the importance of what they're feeling. 4s also have this tendency to isolate themselves whenever life just feels a little too daunting. Fortunately, 2s are very sensitive to their loved ones either being in pain or pulling away from them. So when the 4 does both, the 2 doesn't hesitate to rush in and find out what's wrong or how they can help make it better. All of which is incredibly reassuring to the 4, who now knows that if they're spiraling into a dark place, the 2 will certainly do their best to help pull them out of it. Speaking of bringing some light into the 4's life, the 2's constant encouragement is often another major point of attraction for the 4. Much of this can be explained by the harmonic triad, which groups Enneagram types based on their preferred coping mechanism. Here you'll see that 2s are in the positive outlook group, while 4s are in the reactive group. Full disclosure, this difference isn't always a source of attraction in this relationship, as we'll talk about in a moment. But in general, the 2's resilient optimism in the face of adversity really helps to balance out the 4's tendency to get a bit moody, depressed, or downright self-destructive whenever things don't go their way. The 2's positive outlook also makes them great at seeing the best in other people, which then provides the 4 with a very loving and affirming mirror in which to see themselves. Although one major sign of growth for the 4 is when they stop thinking so much about their own reflection and start looking for ways to reflect the beauty and significance in other people. And that's why the 2's generosity is the last and often most important point of attraction for the 4. Healthy 2s have this genuine desire to use their gifts for the good of others, which then inspires the 4 to not just wallow in their painful experiences, but rather turn them into something beautiful, something that has the potential to ease the burden on the next person going through that exact same experience. So, at the end of the day, the 4's attraction to the 2 is rooted not only in the nurturing and encouraging gifts they receive from the 2, but in the way the 2 motivates the 4 to pay those gifts forward in their own unique, imaginative, or creative way. All right, now that we've talked about what can bring 2s and 4s together, it's time to talk about a few things that can pull them apart. Hey there, friend. Looks like you're a little more than halfway through this Enneagram relationship episode, which means it's a great time to not only watch this fancy little neon graphic float off into the distance, but to hit those like and subscribe buttons, you know? You know what I mean? You know those buttons that are sitting right there? Don't be coy, you know where they are. You know, if you're feeling non-committal, you can just hit the like button. It's still really helpful. Okay, let's get back to it. Whenever you have 2 heart types in the same relationship, you're always going to have a clash over who gets the attention and how they get the attention. The reason being that 2s, 3s, and 4s all have a core struggle with shame around their identity. And so they're always seeking various forms of affirmation to help ease their sense of inadequacy. However, 2s and 4s take drastically different approaches to earning the kind of validating attention their heart desires, which is typically the source of their conflict. Now, this is where it helps to layer another Enneagram theory on top of the triad centers, and that's the Hornevian triad. The Hornevian triad is all about the way Enneagram types get what they need from social or relational situations. And here you'll see that 2s are compliant types, while 4s are withdrawn types. So 2s, as compliant heart types, seek affirmation by reaching outward to meet the needs of others, hoping their generosity will naturally get people to let them in. Meanwhile, 4s, as withdrawn heart types, seek affirmation by pulling away from others to cultivate a unique identity, hoping that their individuality will naturally draw people to them. As you can imagine, this push-pull dynamic can leave the 2 feeling rather unappreciated by the 4's constant withdrawal, while the 4 feels overwhelmed by the 2's constant intrusion. Interestingly though, the 4's movement of disintegration is to the low side of the 2. So when they feel stressed or like they're about to lose the support they need to keep pursuing their individualistic dreams, they can get just as clingy and effusive as unhealthy 2s. The problem with that is the 2 really doesn't like to feel wanted or needed from a place of desperation, thanks to this subtle pool of pride they've got festering deep inside their heart. So ironically, just when the 4 feels crippled enough to express their need of the 2 is out seeking validation from other more grateful, upbeat, or impressive people, especially if they've got a strong 3-wing. If indeed the 2 does leave the 4 feeling isolated, then the brooding 4 not only resents the 2's increasingly inauthentic image of positivity and love, but also begins to express this growing fantasy to run away from everything and everyone. Now, this is where it's important to remember that 2s are positive outlook types within the harmonic triad, and so they often can't handle the dark reality of a relationship gone wrong that the 4 is constantly presenting them with. However, from the reactive 4's perspective, the only way that you can reestablish a genuine sense of intimacy is by sharing all these authentic desires and unfiltered emotions. And here we have the big red flag for this relationship, which is this unwillingness in either partner to compromise their perspective, because to do so would require that they let go of the faux sense of affirmation their ego craves. The 2 needing to let go of the superficial praise they get from being so perky and low maintenance, and the 4 needing to let go of the superficial sympathy they get from constantly expressing their struggles. All right, since I'm already verging into some advice-adjacent territory, let's just skip on over to the hopefully helpful tips I've got for my 2-4 couples looking to have a healthier future together. My advice for the 2-4 couples out there is focused entirely on finding a sense of clarity, as both types bring their fair share of emotional confusion to the relationship. First, you 2s would do well to remember what the great Brené Brown once said: "Clear is kind, and unclear is unkind." Her point was essentially that people may think they're being nice or kind by not explicitly stating what they want or how they feel. But all that does is create unfair expectations of people who, much like the 4, may not be great at noticing how imbalanced the relationship has become. Ironically, for all the 4's moments of emotional intuition, they're often so caught up in their own inner drama that they can be terrible at checking in on you 2s. So although it may feel horribly uncomfortable, it's often vital that you 2s make it clear what it is you need from the 4, because the more you expect them to do things without having to ask, the less kind you'll eventually become, aka that harsh type 8 energy you've got inside of you. Now, for you 4s, clarity is all about taking action, which is important for 2 reasons. First, if we take a look at the 4's triadic pattern, you'll see that 4s navigate life primarily via the emotions of their heart center, which they amplify via the thoughts of their head center. This in turn leaves the physical activity of their gut or body center fairly underutilized. And so one of the most effective ways that 4s can escape the endless fantasies that leave them feeling so uncertain about their relationships is to simply start leaning into some practical acts of service. This is also why the 4's movement of integration is to the type 1 reformer, as healthy 4s learn to let their principles or convictions guide their actions rather than their moods. So when 4s do things like commit to helping out around the house or go out of their way to support the 2's goals, it not only helps the 2 feel loved, but also gives the 4 some much needed clarity about their ability to turn their current relationship into their dream relationship. Okay, the next tip I have for this couple is all about how to find clarity amidst unexpected adversity, and it's a direct reference to the harmonic triad we discussed earlier. Since 4s are in the reactive group and 2s are in the positive outlook group, one of the best things this couple can do to find a healthy compromise is to meet in the competency group. The key here is for both partners to practice slowing down as soon as things go sideways, because the 2 is going to want to rush to the silver lining, and the 4 is going to want to rush to express all their unfiltered emotions. And the collision of these 2 polar opposite reactions is what creates so much conflict and confusion in this relationship. So again, during stressful situations, try to pause, collect any and all relevant information, and then do your best to address the issue directly and as rationally as possible. And speaking of addressing issues directly, the last clarity-inducing tip I have for this couple is to ask yourselves if you feel like there's a genuine sense of camaraderie in your relationship. The reason being that camaraderie keeps this couple from falling into codependency, as it's rooted in a mutual trust and respect between both partners. So, for you twos, ask yourself if you trust that the 4 can and will show up for you in the ways you've shown up for them. And do you respect the 4 as your equal? Or are you secretly stepping into the role of the caretaker because you think the 4 is inherently worse off than you? And then for you 4s, ask yourself if you trust that the 2's love comes without any invisible strings attached, and do you truly respect the 2's character? Or are you secretly resentful of the way they win people over with false humility? Now, even if you harbor some of these negative thoughts or feelings, it's not a death sentence. It's called being human and being in a relationship. But what is a death sentence is not talking about it. So, whether it's with a trusted friend, advisor, therapist, or preferably with each other, just be sure to process this stuff before too much time passes, because you want to establish a foundation of clarity before all the ups and downs of this highly emotional relationship start kicking in. All right, and sticking with this theme of getting clear, it's time to wind things down with what some people have called the ultimate source of clarity, and that's the YGAT relationship rating system. First up on the YGAT relationship rating system is the spice meter. And the 2-4 couples definitely bring the heat, thanks to the 4's emotional intensity, the 2's romantic gestures, and their shared desire for passionate intimacy. Sprinkle in a fair amount of drama, and you get yourself about an 8 out of 10. Next up is the power meter. And while this couple might not be storming boardrooms or launching joint ventures, they can still be fairly influential in their own way, thanks to the 2's relational savvy and the 4's creative vision. So let's just put them right in the middle at a 5 out of 10. That leaves us with the fun meter, which is tough because their version of fun is often very different from each other. But since there could be a mashup of joyful exploration meets introspective wandering, I'll put them around international escapades at about a 4 out of 10. All right, folks, there you have it. The Enneagram 2-4 relationship. A dramatically spicy, relationally inspiring couple that's capable of adventuring through both the light and dark side of life. Definitely a lot of good cries coming your way, so be ready. That's a wrap on this Enneagram relationship episode for the Type 2 helper with a Type 4 individualist. If you're shutting it down here, then I will say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please do me a tiny little favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons for me on your way out, if you wouldn't mind. But hey, if you're sticking around for more Enneagram goodness, then you know I've got plenty of relationship-themed content for you to choose from right here on the screen, as well as some more lighthearted content if you twos need a break from all the emotional introspection we just did. But, take your pick.